So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to teach you how to make a file similar to this one here. So what we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at gradient background fills, we're going to be looking at clipping masks, we're going to be looking at color fills, and using these modes here to make those fills interact with the layers underneath them. You can see with that arrow there, that's going to interact. So what you need for these is you need two images to start off with. So I've got this one here, which I like because it's got a really good contrasting line between the basketball player and the background. So that's going to work really well. You can see if you zoom in, it's very dark there and very light there. It's also quite a large image as well, which means that it won't pixelate when I make it when I put it onto an A4 page. I've also got this one here, the one of Michael Jordan, which is also quite large. It's a little bit smaller, but it's got that nice contrasting edge before. Now, an example of what might not work with this in terms of images is something like this photo of Michael Jordan. Now, this looks okay in that it's high contrast, but when we zoom in, we can see that around his head, the white light there really starts to blend into the background. So if you try and remove around his head, what'll happen is it'll start to take out part of his skull, it'll take out part of his shoulder here, it might even come into the white line. So we don't want to work with something like that. We want to go with something that's got this kind of high contrast all around, so you can definitely see him or whoever it is sort of poking out from the background. So anyway, I've got those two images. What I want to do is I want to put them into Photoshop. So I've got this one here and this one here. I can press Shift to select them both, drag them into Photoshop, and it'll create my two files there ready to go. So I've got there and I've got there, and I've got my original for my reference later. So for this project, we want to create an A4 magazine cover. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my final file here that I'm going to put it on. So I am going to choose international paper, and I'm going to choose A4. Now this is going to be a portrait magazine, meaning that it's going to look, the shorter side is going to go horizontal and the vertical side is going to be longer. So this is what I want to do. I can make the background contents white, I can make them any color that I want. I'm going to choose for this to make it black, but I could go in there and make it orange, whatever I wanted, okay? So I start off there, I've got black. I want to get my layers palette. Oh, I've already got that up, so that works fine. What I want to do now is with LeBron James, I want to isolate him from the background. So for LeBron James, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the quick selection tool, which is just here. I'm going to run my mouse over all of the parts of the image that I want to keep, and if we zoom in, we can see that there's the dotted lines there. So I'm going to do that, going around, being a little bit careful, but knowing that I can always fix it up later. So I can see that I'm missing some there. I get pretty close. It looks pretty good. What I do now is I go to refine edge here. And what this red shows me is that, well, it shows me what I'm taking out and what I'm leaving. And it looks pretty good to me. I could choose to smooth the edge a little bit and add a little bit of feathering just to make it so what's happening there, you can see the difference. There's a little bit of red there as it makes the edge a little bit less harsh, and that can make things blend in a little bit better. The next thing I want to do is I want to go new layer with layer mask, and what that's going to do is going to give me a new layer now. And I can see maybe I've feathered it a little bit too much. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to go into refine edge and just put like half a pixel on there. Of course, I've also got to go new layer with layer mask to get that to work. And so I'm happy with that now. So what I can do with this is I can use my movement tool, I can select, and then I'm going to move it into the untitled, and I'm going to place it in there. Now that's probably a little bit too small. So I'm going to go Command T, and I'm going to increase the size of LeBron James until I'm happy with where he is. And I'm going to go about there. Now, because we have a large image, we don't really have to worry about it pixelating. At 100% it's a little blurry, but it's okay. Now what I'm going to do is the same thing for Michael Jordan. So hopefully this will work in the same way. I'm going to go get my quick selection tool. I'm going to go in and I'm going to start going over Michael Jordan's head. I'm going to keep going to try and get into that area there. I can see that I'm missing some of it, but there we go. I'm pretty happy with that. I can always check by going refine edge, and it shows me, yeah, I'm a little bit happier. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to smooth my edge, and you'll notice the difference on the right side here. If we zoom in there and around there especially, if I add some smoothing to that, it's going to help out with the shape of the image. So once again, what I've got to do is I've got to go new layer with layer mask, and then I can move Michael Jordan over to the file that I want to work with. So I want Command T again. I want to make Michael Jordan roughly the same size as LeBron James. We don't really care about who was bigger in real life, but we want the heads to look in proportion to one another. So I'm going to say Michael Jordan's about this height. Okay. Now LeBron James is a bit too tall currently, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I have that layer selected, and I'm going to just pull him down, just in terms of the aesthetics of what I'm looking to go for. So in my original file here, I have Michael Jordan in front. I'm going to leave it like that. So the next thing that I have to do is I have to change the screen mode of my top character. Sorry, I need to change the blend mode of this to screen. My apologies. So I'm going to get Michael Jordan. I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to change this layer to screen. And you'll see instantly we can get this kind of overlap effect. And this is basically the entire effect that's going. The rest of it is just colorization, so it's actually really easy. So what I want to do now is I want to add a new adjustment layer, and it's going to be a solid color. Now this is going to be Michael Jordan's coloring. So we can pick like a kind of a darky red. You can put D70000 if you want to get the exact color of this, or you can pick your own red. Okay, so I've got this here. This is my color fill. What I want to do now, just for the start, is I want to call this multiply. Now that's going to make everything red. Okay, this can be a fun effect if you want for something else to just do some colorization, but I just want it to go around Michael Jordan. So what I do is I go into this area where it says color fill 1, and I can go create clipping mask. Now it's just him. And it looks pretty good. I now want to do the exact same thing to LeBron James. So I'm going to move onto LeBron James here. I'm going to go solid color. And for him, I'm going to pick a yellow. I'm going to go a little bit more into gold. Maybe even a little bit more FCC00. And then what I can do with this one is I can once again go multiply, and I get my yellow color. Now, this is okay currently. If I go back to my other one though, you can see that it's got a little bit more to it. So these layers here are things like the color balance, which is what really makes it pop. We've got a little gradient in the background, which gives us more color, and we've got a little shadow here, which kind of helps it to blend in. I've also got some type, which we'll talk about later. So what I want to do first is I want to put in, up the top, I want to put in a new adjustment layer for color balance. And I can go in there and I'm going to put lots of red in, and I'm also going to put lots of yellow in. And that's going to give us an overall kind of orangey look going on that we're pretty happy with. I'm also going to look at the blending mode for LeBron James, because if we look at Michael Jordan, he's completely red. If I change LeBron James to screen as well, not much changes. If I change it to lighter color, we're still getting nothing here. What I might want to do is, if I change it to linear burn though, it doesn't work as well. What I found was putting LeBron James as the underneath one as a screen can work quite well. It's up to you what you want to do. You can try experimenting. Maybe lighten works better for you. Screen seems to just do not much there. We can do linear dodge add, which makes it a little bit redder. Hard mix makes it completely disappear, so we don't want to do that. You know, for the purposes of this, I'm going to add lighter. I'm just going to go with linear dodge. Just keep it like that. The color balance is fine. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to put in a gradient behind it. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to pick a 2-color gradient, and I can go in and change the color of that later. So don't worry too much at the moment about, you know, the fact that it's green and red. If I click on this, I can go red to double click there and get myself the gold color, and then I can go and change the angle of that. So if I hit OK there, I can change which way the colors are going to come from. I can change all that sort of stuff to make it yellow. Now I need to, of course, it's probably much too bright right now, but I can double click where it says gradient, fill, and I can bring it right down. So almost like 10%. Gives me a look that I'm happy with. So we've got that now. We've got our gradient in the background. We've got our color balance. I can go in and I can try any number of things. I could change the vibrance so I can make it more saturated, but I could make it a little bit less saturated. I could change the vibrance of the color. I don't think I want that. If I decide that I don't want something, I can just drag it onto the trash bin and it disappears. One thing that I might want to do is to put a shadow in down here to get rid of a little bit of the, just make it look like they're kind of blending into nothing. So to do that, I would create a new layer, so not an adjustment layer this time. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the eyedropper to pick a decent background red, something like that, because it's black, but it's got a red tinge to it. Then I'm going to get my paintbrush, and I'm going to pick a fairly large size paintbrush, but it's got to have hardness of 0%. What I can do then is I can start clicking lots of times and start painting in a little fade. Now this fade needs to sort of take out some of these wide shoulders just to kind of make it look like they're both floating in air. Now, if I place LeBron James on top of Michael Jordan, that might work a little bit better. I can always go in and I can look at what I've got now and change around these and see what works, see what doesn't work. I could press Control U and I could take some of the color out of him. If I take some of the color out of him, I now start to get more of that yellow look. So that was Control U, or Command U, sorry. If I do Command L, I could boost up the darkness. So maybe I want to add more shadow to this. I think I do. And I want to also emphasize the brightness of the yellow. With Michael Jordan now, I'm going to do Command L again, and I'm going to go in and darken the black and lighten the white again. Of course, you don't have to do any of this. I'm just experimenting. I'm also going to go back to layer 1, and I'm going to start trying to shape Michael Jordan, LeBron James shoulders out. So I'm kind of happy with that right now. What I can do is I can take all of these layers, and I think it's Command Shift E. No, that flattens. We don't want to do that. I can duplicate all these layers, and I'm going to call them, I don't know, let's see what happens if I duplicate. I'm going to duplicate these, and then I'm going to Command Shift. Then I've got these selected, and I can merge them together. And I know there's a quicker way to do this. I just can't. I can't remember them at the moment. So now it looks a bit strange. So I'm going to get it back because I made a mistake, and that's okay to make mistakes sometimes, especially when you don't quite know what you're doing because you've never done something before. All right, you guys are learning just like I'm learning. All right, there we go. So I'm happy with this now. I've messed around with it. I don't particularly like the things that I've done. I might decide that I want to move my characters up or down slightly. So to do that, I would need to, let's go back and get some stuff started here. I would need to have my layers selected, and then I could move up or down. Of course, we've got to watch out what layers we have selected. I'm going to keep this one off because I was moving this one up. So if I move this, I can kind of, okay, I'm kind of happy with that. Now what I would do is I would probably write my heading somewhere here. I'd probably choose a big blocky font. So I would use some big, so let's say I call my magazine Swish Magazine. I got to make sure it's up the front. I got to make sure it's also the right color because it's red on red right now. You can't see anything. So let's say I color it pink for whatever reason. I could make it quite large. I probably don't want to make it that big, but I can make it like that. Let's say I could go and put it behind my characters if I wanted to put it behind their heads, but I'd have to make sure that I had my layers sorted out for that. I could go in as well, and I could use lighten, and then you can see it starts to work over my characters. I could try a screen mode. That works pretty well. color dodge. I like color dodge over LeBron, but maybe not over Jordan there. So I can keep going through and see what I like. In the other one, I decided to end off with an overlay text. So what the overlay lets me do is change the text depending on what it's over. So the red didn't work too well there, but I can always go in and I could call it, I could use white, and if you use white, this overlay can look pretty cool because it kind of reflects based on what's underneath it. So that's as an overlay, but I could also do soft light, which changes that a little bit. I could use difference, which makes it go on the opposite end of the color spectrum, which really can look good or really bad depending on what your style is, but I could also go in and make it so it's not as visible, so maybe that works. I don't know, maybe you're into that. I could go in and try hue and see what that does. Maybe that's a little bit too see-through. I don't know. Really what I'm doing here is I'm just playing around with what works and what doesn't. So luminosity isn't working for me. Hard mix of light. Not really sure what that does. But let's say I chose overlay for that. When I go in, I can get a really cool look over the top of it. Maybe if I was going for a magazine look, I would move this up quite a bit more. I could have my article title off to the side a little bit, but then LeBron's Lakers jersey gets in the way there, so I could move it down so we don't have to worry about that. Have a little bit of text there and maybe a heading there. That might work. Anyway, good luck and let me know if you need any help.